Welcome to this episode of Sexuality After. I'm very excited to have with me Megan the Doula from Montreal. So if you just want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I am and have been known for quite a long time as Megan the doula. Decided that I would just make it easy for people looking for me online to make a website. So I work as a doula, and I've been doing that for 10 years now. And so really, it was my own experiences of giving birth and being involved in the whole world of pregnancy that really fueled me to get into this line of work. But also my inspiration, I guess, being from like this matriarchal family that I come from, of what happens to be a long line of women who don't necessarily enjoy all of the aspects of parenting, and it being a little bit maybe more challenging for us to kind of balance all of the places that we want to be in our lives at the same time. I really got into this line of work to help other people go through all of those transitions. Because it's not just as simple as like popping out a baby and like, oh, there you go,
I
you've got like a
know.
baby on the breast and like everything's natural and beautiful.
No.
It was very difficult for me to make the transition. And I see that with other people, especially people who are, um, maybe a little bit older, as a lot of people are these days. You've established a career, you've got a whole bunch of life experiences under your belt, and now you have a baby, and you're just like, wait a minute, what am I doing now? I just sit around with this baby, and this doesn't feel very productive.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of why I do this, is really to help normalize this whole aspect of life for people, that becoming a mom doesn't necessarily change every aspect of yourself. It certainly changes your life you know so yeah, so I have I guess you could call it a doula agency at this point, which is called Bump and Glow. So I've got a team of other doulas who work for me as well. And so we're really working with people at any point during pregnancy. And I do a lot of teaching as well, because I'm a talker, as you may find out from this. But yeah, I really love to just share ideas with people and see where people are at, and super excited to be here
That's
talking about
amazing.
sexuality with you.
Totally. From what I can see on your blog and what you just said, you seem to really teach people and be passionate about people understanding about life after giving birth and having kids and what that looks
Mhm.
like. And like you said, kind of incorporating motherhood with who you are as a person. Like it can be easy to lose ourselves after.
Right.
And like you said, be like, well, this isn't productive, just nursing a baby all the time. And so where you go from that, how to figure that all out, like that also seems to
Yeah.
be part of your jam.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah. I think the pregnancy part for a lot of people, it just kind of unfolds, and there are for sure a lot of questions, and the birth experience itself like has a huge sort of ramp up of excitement, and it kind of feels like that's where the experience culminates in like the birth.
Yes.
And then I know for me it was like after I gave birth I was like, oh shit, like I've actually
Yes.
got to take this baby home now and like take care of it somehow. And so I see that happening to a
Totally.
lot of people also, where it does become that kind of like daily grind of like, oh my god, I have to do this baby thing every day. It wasn't just like one day at the birth, where I give birth and like ta-da.
No,
Yeah.
all the focus, you're right. Like all the focus
Yeah.
is on the birth, which is,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, it's important and painful
Mhm.
and, like big,
Yeah.
but it's like one day of your life or like
Right.
three max. And then
Yeah.
you have a new baby at home every day. And you're like, what the fuck do I do with this thing?
Yeah. Exactly.
Totally. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I found Megan through her blog, and she had a blog series on getting it on after kids or motherhood. I forget exactly what it was called, but
Yeah. It's called Moms Who Get It On.
moms who get it on.
Yeah.
Yes. So I love that you talked about sexuality in your blog, because that's an aspect, as you know, of motherhood and life after birth that people don't talk about that much,
Right.
even with their friends. And there's a lot of shame and, am I doing it right? And why don't I want to have sex? Why do I want to have lots of sex? Like, it's
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Everybody's always feeling like whatever they're going through is not what other people are going through for
Yeah,
some reason. Very
totally.
much this sense of like, I'm the only one who's ever experienced this ever in life,
Yeah.
It's like, no, not really.
Right. That's so true though. That's
Yeah.
I think where a lot of shame comes from, which is why I'm having this podcast in the first place. Yeah. Can we hear about part of whatever you feel comfortable sharing about your own experience of kind of growing up, like your basic beliefs going into marriage, into kids, and then how kids affected your sexuality?
Sure. I mean, going into being married, I got married. I'm now separated. I got married when I was what I thought very experienced in terms of all different sort of things in life, but specifically sex. I was like, I have sowed my wild oats. I have had multiple, we don't need to name the number, but like multiple partners, enough to know that like this person who I really love is like also an appropriate sexual partner. And
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, sure, like we're in love, let's do this, let's get married and have some babies. And obviously now looking back, I'm almost 38 years old. I was 26 when we got married, and then I was pregnant right away afterwards.
Yeah.
But I was like, I am very, I'm like midway through my 20s. Like I have, I've experienced all the things that I need to experience in order to, know that this is just going to be it.
Right.
And so I had sort of learned a little bit, I guess, in my upbringing. My mom was a younger mom. I didn't have this idea that like, oh, I've got to accomplish like all of these other things first before having babies. And
Right.
it didn't really feel like there wasn't a whole lot of like one way of thinking or another about sex really in my family growing up. So it wasn't like there was no shame in like it was you were gonna sleep with people before you got married. That was
Okay.
definitely
Yeah.
like something that was open in our family.
Cool.
um but it wasn't like, oh, you've got to like try out different things and make sure that you've got this established career or like finish an education. Or it was very much kind of like, whatever, you're in love, cool, let's, you want to get married, okay. So I kind
Mhm.
of went into it without really any idea of like where that was going to bring me next. I just thought it was like another like milestone of like, cool, people do this,
Like
pretty
you have
normal.
kids and then you figure out your life as you go along.
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely how it's worked out. But I don't think I was necessarily ready for like how life changing the having children aspect was going to be
Right.
on everything. But specifically, as we're talking about sex right now, just like that's not the same thing at all as like being in your early 20s and just like you get to do what you want when you want and you have sex when you feel like it.
No.
And you're like your body is not necessarily perfect, but you feel pretty good about it because it hasn't gone through any sort of experience such as gaining 55 pounds and then like pushing out a giant baby and then figuring out how to recover from that.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like, yeah, you do it when you feel like it, and you have time for it. I got as much sleep as I needed before I had babies. There was
Yep.
never any kind of like thought process around it. Maybe
Mhm.
in certain periods it was like, oh, it's maybe been a little while, we've been busy or whatever, but it was nothing like it was after having kids where you're like it was completely different.
I also don't know that there is any way to prepare for life after baby. Like, no matter how much you read, the only people I think that have some idea of what it's like before they have their own kids is someone who's like a nanny. And
Yeah, like a
even then, it's not the
full-time live-in
same.
nanny.
Yeah. Even then, it's not the same because you
Mhm,
can go to bed at night usually
right.
and have a good sleep. But yeah, there's nothing that can really prepare you.
No, no. And I teach prenatal classes, and I say that sometimes, like, about every subject that we talk about, it goes in one ear and out the other because people hear ultimately what they want to hear. Like, what fits my narrative in this story? And in this story, when I tell people, your baby's probably going to sleep like shit, and you're going to be resentful about the lack of sleep that you get. Um, they don't hear that. They're like, no, I'm going to figure out a way for my baby to sleep when I feel like they should sleep. And I will, of course, like get as much sleep as necessary because I require a lot of sleep. And I'm like, okay, well, good luck. You know, because
I've read
I
five
know that
books
there's
on
nothing I can
sleep.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My baby's gonna abide by the books.
Right, exactly. Right. My baby is going to be completely different than every other baby because my
Yes.
experience is so unique. Again, like
Yeah.
everyone believes that their experience is going to be so unique. And people don't want to hear that like probably you will be plagued by all the same issues as everybody else who's ever had a baby in the history of time.
Yes.
It's just how it goes.
It's true. So
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So what happened with your body and your sex life and sexuality after having a baby?
I mean, I write about this a little bit in the blog that I think that you read, and I reread it just before we were going to have this conversation to see like what exactly did I put out there, you know, because
Yeah.
I get pretty excited about writing stuff, and sometimes I say too much, but um, I remember like I felt really great in my body. I was getting married, so I was really fit, but I got pregnant a month I think after we got married, and I was probably at like my ideal, size, and that isn't really saying anything because I'm not super attached to that sort of thing, but I felt really good. So during my pregnancy, starting off at like a lower weight than maybe I normally would even be at, at the end of my pregnancy, my husband at the time and I joked that I had like reverse body dysmorphia where I thought I looked really amazing and like not as pregnant as I did.
Right.
And then, we were out one day and I saw someone point at me and go, oh my God. And I was like, are they pointing at me? Like, and he's like, yeah, you're literally as big as a house. Like, you're huge. You're like 41 weeks pregnant and you're giant. And I was like, I feel amazing. Like, I was wearing,
Aw.
head to toe, just like tight spandex clothes, like everywhere I went. I did not care. It was just like,
Yeah.
because my belly had always been, I'd always had sort of like a pot belly. And so for me during pregnancy, I was like, this round belly is now like the feature of me physically. I look
Totally.
great. Like it felt like it kind of hid that sort of, pot belly that I had. So I was like, I'm
Mhm.
just showing everything off. Like I felt
Yeah.
great and wonderful. And like I said, I gained quite a bit of weight. And then after giving birth, you know, feeling sort of like a mixture of, I had a ginormous baby. My first baby was 11 pounds. So that was like, yeah,
Oh
pretty
my God.
intense. Yeah.
Holy
And
crap.
so obviously I lost quite a bit of weight at the delivery. And then, in the first few weeks afterwards, just, not really eating properly, being super stressed out about just
Of
like,
course.
feeding and like all of the stuff, that comes with having a baby. And so physically, when I look back at those pictures, I lost probably all my pregnancy weight in the first couple of months,
Yep.
and but I also kind of look a little bit like empty, like an empty shell of someone who's just like barely existing on, the food and vitamin D and sleep and whatever else that I was, kind of scraping by on. So,
Yeah.
in terms of like that, there was no situation where I was like, oh, I hate the way I look. I don't like my body is like, ugh. I didn't feel that at all. But I do remember going to the 6-week follow-up appointment. And this is like a big thing for, I think, a lot of people when they have
Mhm.
a baby for the first time, usually, where you're expected to, I guess, at that 6-week appointment, someone is going to sort of ask you or talk to you about like starting sex again, like resuming sex. Like a lot of partners, like men especially, are like, okay, like here we go, 6-week appointment. We're going to get to like get the green light. Some people call it
Yep.
that, like green light to like start going crazy and having sex again.
Yep.
And I remember like my midwife looking at us and she was like, so like, have you guys had sex yet? And I thought like, oh, I wasn't supposed to for 6 weeks. So I was like, phew, right?
Right.
So then we get to this appointment and she's asking me and I'm like, no. And then I'm kind of like, my husband's sort of sitting there like, very patiently. And I'm like, no, like the thought had not even crossed my mind. I was like, in what world are you living, lady? Like where, and how would I be doing this sex? Like,
Yeah.
there's no time in my life for that. Like, I don't have time to get enough sleep. This baby wakes up all the time. Like, there was no oh, like leisurely, we can just do it whenever feeling, it would have to just fit into like the time between one thing and another, and that's not very
Totally.
sexy for me.
Yeah.
I am like more of a unscheduled kind of person, so that was a huge thing for me. And really, I think it probably was 3 months before we even ended up having sex. And I had like stitches, on the perineum that obviously this 11-pound baby had created a little bit of damage. So there was
Yeah.
that aspect as well. But I think for me, it was just the kind of like overwhelm of the whole thing. Like, when do you want me to schedule in this sex that you speak of?
Yeah.
And like, typically I had been someone who thought, okay, and still do that, I don't want to do like a 10-minute sex thing. I'm not going to do it if it's going to fit into this, like, I'm like, let's draw it out. Like, it's got to
Yeah.
take like, a super long time, and then maybe there's breaks and we're chatting, and it's like, it's a whole big thing for
Oh,
me. So
so
like,
nice.
that idea of sex and a child, like, those two
They
do
do
not
not
go
go.
together
No,
at all. No, no.
no.
So that's what happened.
I love it. Before this interview, I was trying to remember, like my son is 4 right now, so I was trying to remember back to my experience.
Hmm.
And yeah, I also thought that you weren't supposed to have sex until
Right.
6 weeks.
Hmm.
And I don't remember if it was at 6 weeks or like maybe 8 weeks that we tried, and it was painful.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to quite be that painful.
Yeah.
And like we had sex after that, but it was always kind of a working up to it and like lots of lube, lot because it's like
Right.
hurting. And then
Yeah.
I think it took like a year before it stopped hurting.
Yeah. And that's, I think, a more common experience than people think. Like, I tell people, if you are not used to using lubricant, you're going to have to get used to it and like get over the stigma of that being something that's like, I don't know, abnormal, or maybe for some people it might be too kinky. I don't really know what the stigma behind using lube is for some people, but the hormones of like breastfeeding specifically, but even just like the the physical nature of birth, it leaves a mark, and that does take time to sort of heal. So it is really kind of like, okay, you're going to have to ease back into it. I warn people about that, like the first few times, it may feel like the first few times you had sex, like way back whenever you started having sex.
Yeah,
You might need to like work around the intercourse portion of things for quite a while. And that could be really fun, or it could be really like disappointing for some people.
totally.
But I think, yeah, this idea that someone's going to say, okay, by 6 weeks you're physically ready. Even if you're physically ready, doesn't mean you're emotionally ready or mentally ready. It doesn't mean that you've even thought about it. For some people, yes, they're like aching, like they can't wait. And I'm like, as soon as you're not bleeding and you've healed, like go for it.
Yeah,
But I think it's more of this idea of like, ding, 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 the 6 weeks is up. There goes your grace period of you know being a new mom, and now you've just got to get back to whatever your old routine was. Like, that doesn't make any sense for most people.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you find your way through that um period? Like maybe the first year or two. How did you shift? Like, did you shift your mentality about, sex? You want sex to take like a long time? Because I love that, but like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's vacation sex, like
Right.
without your kid.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
kids of I don't know, little kids in general, it's hard to find
Right.
time when you both have energy and you have 2 hours to have sex. Like, that like never happens.
Yeah. It's got to be, I mean, it's a combination of things, really. Like, in terms of like, how did ultimately we navigate it, I don't want to be disappointing and say like, ultimately I don't know if we ever really did you
That's
know
fair though.
um yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm now separated, so this husband of mine who navigated all of this with me, bless him, like, we didn't make it through that together necessarily.
Totally.
I think it was it was hard for us for sure because of like really back to the scheduling conflicts of, he was working at night a lot. He was a musician. So like the times where eventually you do get to have some breaks when like babies do start to sleep more at night, like we weren't together during those times, you know? The time that we spent together was time that we were parenting together, you know, with our two kind of weird schedules of like this musician and this doula and like raising this baby kind of thing. It was like it was the three of us like all the time, you know? So I mean, we kind of found our ways back to each other, you know, but not to the point where either of us were really satisfied with where things were. But I think that was just sort of a general thing that was happening in terms of like our life together. You know, we had another baby together. So, I mean, we definitely had sex once, you know, but it wasn't like we weren't back to, you know, what either one of us would have considered like the frequency that we had been at. So I don't know necessarily like how long it takes the average person, but I do know that, you know, a few years later, after kind of like really having a bit of a hard time with all this, coming across this great article, which of course like helps me, you know, be better at my job, understanding kind of the postpartum experience. You know, just reading about hormones after birth and how it takes a full 2 years for a woman's hormones to completely restabilize. And it was funny because when I read it, I had passed that 2 year period, and I was like, oh, that makes complete and total sense. Because at 2 years was kind of what I call like coming out of the fog for me, where I was like,
Yep.
I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my God, there you are. You're still
Yes.
there. Right?
Yes.
This person that I knew always existed, but for some reason I was just too tired, too overwhelmed. I was too in like the baby world, which was great because I was totally in it. Like we were, you know, fully immersed in parenting. But there were parts of myself that I was like, I guess it's gone, you know, and then I saw it and I was like, oh my God, she's still in there, you know, this
Yes.
little like sexy little vixen who, you know, has all of these desires for not just sex, but other things in life. Also, I was like, oh my God, I'm not just this like baby maker, breastfeeder. And now, of course, I had become a doula. So, like, everything in my life revolved around the
Yep.
idea of motherhood, right? I ate, slept, breathed, breastfed, everything I did, my job, like, didn't matter what I was talking about. It had something to do with babies,
Totally.
you know? So as soon as that fog started to clear a little bit, I was like, oh, like I started kind of, you know, reaching out to friends again to like kind of socialize. And like I started to see myself, I started to dress a little bit differently because I was like, okay. And of course, right around that time, we have another baby, you know, so I was like,
Right.
back down into it, you know, but I think that that's really important for people to realize that like you can't expect that, you know, your body's not going to know what just happened, you know, and the body mind connection is so strong that, you know, people fighting this idea of like, don't look like you just had a baby, like, oh, you know, you're dressing like a new mom, or, you know, when we have like on the cover of magazines, like, you know, whatever latest celebrity has just given birth and like she doesn't even look like she just had a baby. This is like what people are saying as a compliment, you know, and
Totally.
it just further reinforces to moms that like it's not hot to be a mom. You shouldn't look like a mom. You shouldn't like dress like a mom. Like, you know, I have friends without kids who are like mom jeans. And I'm like, I can't wear mom jeans. I am a mom. So like mom jeans on me do not look the way they are intended to
Mom
look.
jeans only look good on 17-year-olds.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm like, I need to wear teenager jeans so that I look
Yeah.
good. I can't wear the jeans for the people like me, you know? And
Exactly.
so when society has this whole idea that like moms shouldn't look like moms because being a mom is not really hot unless it's this stereotypical MILF from a movie, you know, where she's like beyond those mom years. She's a mom of teenagers, right? Like
Yep.
that's sexy because now she's much older. She's the cougar, you know?
Yep.
But like a mom with like, you know, the old navy droopy t-shirt and like the yoga pants that she's worn 3 days in a row with the stroller at the park, like nobody finds that sexy. But then my husband would go out with the baby in a baby carrier to like take a walk or go to the grocery store, and it would take him forever. And you'd come home like, what the hell were you doing? It's like, everyone stops me. Everyone wants to talk to me. Everybody's poking their head at the baby. They want, they're like, oh my God, look at you. It's so amazing. You know, dads get like a little bit of a dad bod, and everyone's like, oh, so sexy, right? Like it's the complete opposite for them. As soon as they become a parent, and if they're actually good at it, everyone's like, wow, you know? And then if a mom is like fully in her mom role, everyone's like, oh, well, she used to be pretty or she used to be sexy. You know, it's
Totally.
really screwed up.
Totally a double standard.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Um, what do you wish society was instead? Like if you could create society.
Oh God, if I could create
Well,
society, I mean,
around this
I think
specifically.
right, yeah. Um, I mean, obviously, I would hope that people would be able to embrace like the interchangeable roles that parents can have, but also really that people understood, like how much energy it does take to, you know, grow a baby, birth a baby, take care of the baby, and then to do it to the standard that we're held to, as mothers specifically, like it makes it impossible for us to really balance other things. Like if you're
Yeah.
doing really well at one thing, I would be pretty sure that you're failing in another place in your life. And so yeah, for sure, if we celebrated moms the way that we celebrated dads for the same standards and levels, I mean, you would be able to have moms who wouldn't feel so guilty all the time. I deal a lot with that sort of thing in my line of work. And I've never been the guilty type. Like I am like, I don't have guilt in terms of like taking care of myself or anything. Like if I throw myself into something, it's because I want to, and I don't try to martyr myself for it. But I think a lot of people do feel guilty. They feel guilty if they take time for themselves. They feel guilty if they're not doing all the things, like you're not showing up with the cupcakes and you're not sleep deprived because you've been caring for this baby so much. Like if we were able to maybe like let go of the micromanaging of aspect of parenting and delegate things to maybe our partners or other people to help us. Like I just wish this whole like equality thing would actually show up in parenting because it's taking a really long time to get there, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even just the standards that society has for moms versus dads.
Right. Like
Yeah.
Ali Wong, this comedian, I don't know if you've seen her stand
Mm-mm.
up, but it's like she's totally 7 months pregnant, on her Netflix special. And one of the best lines is that she's sort of ranting about how hard it is to be pregnant and how her husband like showed up to the ultrasound and everyone's like, oh my God, he went to the ultrasound. And she's like, so did I. If I wasn't here, there would be no ultrasound, And then
Right.
she says, why does it take so little for a dad to be a good dad and so little for a mom to be a shitty mom?
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we need to take a look at how we're distributing our expectations, because then if you wouldn't be looking around going like, why is this woman so, you know, such a like slob who doesn't take care of herself and her self-esteem is down the drain? Why doesn't she feel sexy? I don't know. Maybe she's tired. Maybe she
Yeah.
needs a shower first,
Yeah.
like that
Exactly.
helps.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't agree with you more on that. What is one myth around sex or sexuality after having a baby that you would want to debunk?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of things that people expect on like different sides of the coin. So I think, we definitely have a lot of myths that like moms, don't want to have sex anymore or they're too tired, similar to all the things that I've just said. But then there is a whole other side of the coin. And this is what I found through, talking with women, that like some moms are fully horny and turned on, like, to the maximum after having babies. And I have a friend of mine who I interviewed for that blog series who said that she was like 2 weeks postpartum and just like lying in bed with her partner and breastfeeding, and she was like so turned on by their roles as parents that it was just like put the baby to the side and like let's have sex right now,
Yeah.
because this is just so hot. And I think that sometimes people don't necessarily see parenting in that sort of way. Like there's a whole connection, and I mean, you've given birth and you're, like you know what it is to experience childbirth. And some people are really taken aback by how sensual or sexual the experience can kind of be.
Mm.
And it's like, well, it's all the same body parts, that most people typically will use to make a baby and then give birth to the baby. And so, you know, especially too with like breastfeeding and just everything, it's like it's all very much connected, you know? So there is something that can be so sexy about a mom that doesn't have to be taken to this context of like movie MILF. It could really
Yeah.
just be like, wow, look at you being such a good parent. Like
Yeah.
that's such a turn on, you know?
Yeah. Personally, after being a parent, I find other parents sexier than people that aren't in general, I
Mm,
find.
right. Yeah.
Just because of, I don't know, they're just more connected to life and to themselves. And
And I think
I
it's
don't know
also
what it
like, wow,
is.
you
It's
can
like,
do hard things, you know? Like you look at them and
yeah,
you're
it's just
like,
like respect there.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
Totally. I totally feel like that. When I see like, you know, men, women, whoever out and about, I'm just like, most of the time with women, I'm not like, oh my gosh, she's so sexy. I'm just kind of thinking like, yeah, queen, like you got this. Like I,
Totally.
you know, I'm much more likely to offer help to someone, like just my own bias, who's like pushing a stroller, has kids. Like, do you need me to carry something? Do you want me to buy your groceries? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? You know, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I want to help them. And then of
Yeah.
course, when I see dads, I'm like, hello, hot dad, you
Yeah.
know, because like, look at you caring for that baby. It's just very primitive
Yeah.
part of our brains, I think.
Totally. I know
Yeah.
that the same thing can happen to guys too. Like there's a lot of guys I know that I've talked to that are parents that feel the same way. They find
Mhm.
moms like way sexier than
Oh,
non-moms.
yeah,
That kind of
yeah,
sounds bad, I guess, but it's kind of the reversal anyway, so let's own it.
yeah. I
Um
think there is like
it
there
does
is still
happen.
kind of a little bit of that like fetish, you know, the
Yep,
fetishization, I guess, of
there
like
can be that too.
moms,
Yeah.
you know, which whatever, I'm cool. I'm cool with
Yeah.
that. Like if I walk around and people think I'm attractive specifically because they know I'm a mom, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
cool.
take
You
it.
know. Yeah, exactly. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up as well that some women feel really sexual after giving birth and they really want sex.
Hmm.
Um, I remember sex felt really good, like more pleasurable after giving birth. I think just because there was
Right.
like a lot of blood down there, whatever. My extra sensitivity lasted for quite a while as well. So that was nice. It was like, it
Yeah.
hurts, but then once I get over that and, we
Like,
warm
is
that
the
up,
pain the
then it
pleasure?
feels
Like
like extra good. So that's good.
yeah, I've heard that a lot. It's like from,
Yeah.
you know, just chit chat with all sorts of different women. Like I remember one woman that just casually somehow, this is a conversation that I get into because of the kind of person that I am, but I'll casually at a kid's birthday party talking with this woman I had just met about her sex life. And she said, you know, when my first was born, it was like he turned off all the lights down there. But then when my second was born, it's like he turned on all the, like, turned them all back on.
Oh,
And I think it's really interesting to, you know, think about like, yeah, the fact that like giving birth can totally affect even like physically the sensations that
yeah.
someone has, you know,
Yep.
hopefully for the better and not for the worse, but obviously both happen. But
Yep.
yeah, I think sometimes we just keep them totally separate. Like I work with a lot of couples and you know, specifically with men as partners who are like, I'm not going to watch the process of birth because I don't want it to like change the way I see her or her vagina.
Yep.
And I'm like, you're definitely going to watch and I won't force you, but you're for sure going to want to look because you're curious. And what you see is going to change the way you see her, but not the way you think. You're not going to feel worthy to be in the same room as her after that. That's how you're going to see her. You're going to see her as like this superhuman version of the woman you thought you knew. You're not going to think it's gross,
Yeah. That gave me
right? Like,
goosebumps. That's
yeah.
totally was my husband's experience too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can you watch that? And, you know, and witnessed many births. You can't see that kind of thing and be like, man, bodies are just whatever. Like, you
No.
know,
I was lucky enough to be at 2 of my sister's births. I was like,
wow.
"Oh my
Yeah.
god, you're a superhuman. This is amazing." Like,
I know. You just can't even believe what people go through, you know? So,
yeah,
yeah.
totally. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna mention I know a lady who the day after she gave birth, she was ridiculously horny, and she
Right.
was like, my vagina doesn't feel ready, but like, let's have anal sex." And so they had like
I love
crazy
it.
anal sex. And, I mean, that happens too. And I
Right.
feel like there could be a lot of shame for women that feel that way too. Like they could be like, oh, like I thought I wasn't supposed to be horny or not want sex.
Hmm.
What's wrong with me that I do want sex? And Even what you were saying about being turned on by like being a parent or taking care of a
Yeah.
baby, there could be a lot of shame around that too. Like, oh, is my baby turning me on? Like, what's going on here?
Yep.
Do you find that, or can you speak to that at all about people you've worked with?
I mean, I think it just exists when sex is involved in the conversation. I think the word shame follows very closely after. Where,
Yeah.
doesn't really matter what the topic is. I think there's always some version of that. I think um I don't know necessarily that people talk about it so much if everything's going well. Like, and for most people, going well means that like the expectations that their partner or society has for them is matching up with their reality, which is like you just kind of get back into the swing of things. And so for some people, I think maybe like feeling, super turned on, they're just kind of like, yay, phew, like that
Right.
thing that I thought might happen didn't happen to me. I think it's a lot more common to hear the other side of things where
Hmm.
people are like, hi, I haven't had sex in 2 years. Like fully
Totally.
married, in a relationship, raising children with someone, not having sex with them ever, not having sex with other people. Like it's just you know, and I've heard a lot of women say, I think I'm asexual now, you know? And
Yeah.
like having this belief that like their sexuality has been zapped and it's gone, never to be seen again. And I usually urge them to look deeper into that because I'm pretty sure it's there. You're just expecting it to be, responsive to things that it is no longer responsive to,
Yeah.
you know, because we change as people, right?
Yeah.
So I think that yeah, there is like a lot of shame when we're in a supposedly happy situation, which most people are, when they're like, we had a baby together. No one's going to be like, we had a baby together. And now we don't even touch each other,
Yeah.
because you're supposed to be now like this happy family unit. And that's very shameful, I think, for people who are truly in love with their partner and truly in love with having that baby,
And
you
truly
know,
don't
and,
want to have sex
and truly don't want to have
anymore.
sex,
Yeah.
and so they're like, wow, I can never tell anyone this because people are going to think I don't love him, or they're going to think I don't love having this baby. I can't talk about the fact that like having the baby probably killed my sex drive,
Yeah.
and who do you even go and talk to about that? It's not like
Totally.
there's like sex therapists just like all over the place. It's not that
No.
people, some people don't want to reach out to that person. They might not be able to talk to your friends. Your family doctor is going to be probably pretty useless, if you bring that sort of topic up. So it's like people are kind of like, okay, well, I guess. And plus, I don't really want to. So how much do I want to fix this problem, right? Like when I'm feeling pretty apathetic about the whole thing in general, like, whatever, I'll just watch TV,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Um, so in that kind of situation, how, like in general too, how important do you think our sexuality is to our well-being? And so do you feel like people should just be like, I'm asexual now, that's okay? Or should they like be trying to get their sexuality back, or reconnect with it? And if they do, how do you advise them to do that? Like, is that part of what you do as a doula, or is that more
I
with
mean,
your
that's not
friends?
really part of what I do professionally. I would say personally, like I've always sort of been, going back to like teenage years, like I've always been the like girl talk girlfriend. Like I'm
Mhm.
always up for like talking about sex. Like I'll get random messages from someone who's like, a friend obviously, who's like, I don't know who else to talk to about this. Like, can
Right.
we talk? And I'm like, oh my God, yes. Like it's like my favorite thing.
Yeah.
So I've always, on a personal level, been someone who I think has those types of conversations with people. But professionally, like people don't, pay me for sex advice,
Right.
but I'll give it if they want it.
Yeah.
So I think personally and, generally two different things. Like for me, I felt, very frustrated and very concerned when I felt like, where did my libido go? Like, how am I going to get back to that? Because that was a big part of who I was and sort of part of my life, I went from having all sorts of different sexual experiences and wanting it in different ways and places and times and all of that stuff to like I would rather just eat a bowl of ice cream, but like also like, why do I only want to eat this bowl of ice cream? That did
Yeah.
not sit well with me, you know?
Yeah.
So I knew personally I had to find a way out of that. And I did, thankfully, because it is something that's super important for me. But do I necessarily think it's important for everybody? I don't know. I think for sure there are some people who are probably totally fine just, with changes in their libido, and it doesn't affect them necessarily as much. I just like there are some people who get really, really affected by, maybe like their paycheck or the type of car that they're driving. I'm like, I don't care what kind of car I drive. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
bother me. And maybe someone feels like that about their sex life. I don't know. But I
Yeah.
think it's the place in between where people are like, yeah, I think I'm asexual now. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you really like sure about that? Because I'm pretty sure if like some hot celebrity crush like started sexting you, you would get totally turned on. And if they came and showed up at your door with no baggage, no
Yeah.
like, you didn't wash their dirty clothes, you haven't been like nagging them about their, lack of parenting skills, like there's nothing surrounding that experience other than just like getting your, like brains fucked out of your head. Like I'm pretty sure you would go for it,
Yeah.
And I think that if they're like, yeah, you're right, actually, that would be pretty hot. I'm like, then that's not very asexual,
Yeah.
because someone who's asexual truly doesn't need any sort of sexual like stimulation in their life, And so I think to confuse a drop in libido with just being like, I don't need sex, I've resigned myself to that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if we necessarily change just like that,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then how do you what advice do you give people for getting back to their sexuality?
It's funny because I did this a couple of years ago. This Facebook group that I'm part of was having these sort of like different like meetups in the park where they would bring like different sort of, experts, I guess you would call them. And so a friend of mine who was running this group was like, would you come and like talk to moms about like postpartum sex? So I was like, of course I
Yeah.
will. I'm so excited. So I go and do that. And I'm talking to these women in this park, and there comes this moment where I start to talk about masturbation and how like normal it is, and how like that's one of the easiest ways to kind of get back into things because
Yes.
it's usually pretty quick. It's like you know it's going to work for you. You're not going to get touched in any ways that don't feel right. Your body parts that you want to have avoided are avoided simply because you're in charge. And I couldn't have seen more scared or blanker looks on these faces than like if I had like painted them on myself. And so I was kind of like, what is nobody, is nobody getting this right now? So, I was embarrassed, number one, for bringing it up, thinking that like people are going to be all over this. Like everybody's going to be excited to hear about like how, they should just like get back into masturbating. And
Yes.
instead it was like crickets. But I still maintain that that's probably one of the best things to start with, just in terms of like, okay, I just want to like have an orgasm. I just want to
Yes.
like get off.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't require a lot of work. Like forget the 2 hours of like cuddling and talking and different, positions and things like that I talked about. This is like 5 minutes. Okay. Like you could probably fit that into your life with a baby, and it's something that like is completely controlled by the person doing it, so nothing can really go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a really good place to start. I'm always surprised when people don't seem like open about masturbation, because I feel like that's kind of a teenager thing that like a lot of, women are like, I don't want to like, no one talked about that when I was a teenager. No girls talked about masturbation. We knew boys masturbated. Like that was a given. You learn that in sex ed. You're like, okay, boys masturbate, girls get their periods. Like that's
Yeah.
where the
Right.
separation is, right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
so weird that that's like the equivalent. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, sex ed. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, I I feel like as grown-ups now, I'm like, I think we can all just put it out there. It's like, secrets out.
Yeah.
Everyone's touching themselves, like
Yeah. Yes.
so
And
that's what I would suggest for people to start, because I
yeah.
mean, you can't say like, oh, start by ordering some like kinky sex toys on a website. Like just start by taking off your clothes first. Forget about getting redressed into a different outfit.
Yeah.
Like that takes a lot of work, and we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of energy. So, and I've given this advice to some of my friends who are postpartum. I'm like, have you just tried like lying naked with him in bed, or her, whoever your partner is? Like sometimes just by the sheer fact that your bodies are naked next to each other, it's really hard for something to not happen.
Yep.
But it's also okay if it doesn't, and you can kind of take it wherever you want to go. But just to even like laugh about, like, let's just go lie naked together, like no expectations. It's not like, okay, tonight's the night, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
It's just like, let's put our phones down and be naked together.
Yeah. I
Kind of
love those two
simple.
things. That is
Yeah.
amazing. I was thinking before this interview, like, what I was trying to think of what advice I would give as well. And
Mhm.
basically the same two things.
Yay. I love that.
So one is with your partner to kind of take sex off the table, at least to start with,
Mhm.
and say, yeah, let's just be naked together, or let's give each other back rubs. Let's just be naked together and focus on each other. And you can even set a time, like 10 minutes or something. If you feel like I don't have a lot of time, I want to try sleeping, you can set a timer. I'm a big fan of timers when it
Oh
comes to
yeah.
sex or
I'm like the
pleasure.
opposite of that.
Not like, oh, we have 10 minutes to have sex, but like,
Right.
let's just do something. And the timer
Yeah.
sometimes helps people feel safe because they know that there's not going to be further pressure, or that it's not going to, take 2 hours when they really only wanted to spend 10 minutes doing it or whatever. So that's kind of
Mhm.
what I mean by I'm a fan of timers, is you
Yeah.
can do things in a safe container, kind of,
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
afraid of getting too overwhelmed or that it'll go too long. And something that helped my husband and I for sure is masturbation time, like you were saying. So he would take the baby, and I knew that I had 20 minutes or half an hour to masturbate, and vice versa. Like we supported each other in masturbation. That took a little while to get to, but once we got
Yeah.
there and figured that out, it really worked for us.
Yeah.
And
And
it's,
that's a huge thing
yeah,
because most people in like committed relationships where you're living together, there somehow seems to be this expectation that like now nobody masturbates. And if you do, it's got to be like hidden from the other person, because the implications would be that like they're not pleasing you, or you want to just do it yourself. So like what
yeah.
does that mean about them? And I'm always like, what is that? What? Like what? No, sometimes it's just fast and easy, and like I
Yeah.
don't like next
And
time
takes a
you
lot
can
less
be
effort
involved.
sometimes,
Yeah.
or you can masturbate when you're tired, but having sex when you're tired is sometimes a little overwhelming,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So I totally
Yeah.
agree. And masturbation after you have a baby is a really good way to re-explore your body on your own,
Mhm.
like in your
Yeah.
own time.
Yeah,
So
for
I
sure.
really, really love that you brought that up. And even just to find pleasure in your body without the pressure of having an orgasm, or the pressure of like, I don't know, so many things that we put pressure on ourselves about during sex.
Yeah. And
Um,
also, I mean, our relationships do change with our bodies as well, for sure, in terms of like, yeah, when you're pregnant and then you give birth, and then the few months afterwards, and depending if you're breastfeeding or not, like there's so many things going on with your body that like sometimes it's nice to just figure out what it all means now before you bring it to somebody else,
yeah,
because I don't know. I mean, like, I have a partner right now who is like very grabby of, body parts, and just regularly
yeah,
and also during sex, specifically with like a belly roll or something. And it's taken me like a long time. I haven't had a baby in 8 years, right? So it's like
yeah,
I still have a postpartum body, in the fact that like this body gave birth twice. I have a
yeah,
mom's body. Like
yeah,
these stretch marks are not going anywhere. I have this little belly still, same belly I've always had my whole life, signature, move here, just this belly roll. But like
yeah,
it takes me, I think, some time to go, oh right, his like desire for me and these body parts is not connected directly to the way I feel about it. Right.
yes,
So like I have to
totally.
say to myself, like, if he wants to grab my belly and like growl and thinks thinks it's really sexy, I have to try to be like, he thinks this is sexy, and it's not like, for me, my instinct is like, no, my belly, blah, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
no, I love it. And so it's like
Yeah.
this kind of battle of like, okay, I have to understand that like the way that I'm viewed is not the same way I'm viewing myself. And it doesn't mean to do things that you don't want to do, but just to kind of be open to like, if this person is like loving this body that is showing up as is, like maybe I should take a cue from them and
Totally.
also love this body that's showing up like this, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's really important too, because a lot of women tend to be their own worst enemy in terms of how they're feeling. And like a lot of partners are just kind of like, you're here. That's
Yeah.
great. That's enough for me. I love
Yeah.
it. You
You're
know,
totally
let's
sexy.
do
I
the
don't care
thing.
about the things. I don't care
Right.
about
You know, and
whatever
we're
it
like,
is.
oh,
Yeah.
don't look at me, you know, like, oh,
Yeah.
my body's different, you know, and it's funny too, because, you know, getting older and, you know, of course, like being married and then being separated and now being, you know, 15 years older than I was when I first met my ex-husband and got married. It's like, okay, so now these partners are also that much older, and their experiences are a little bit different also, to the point where they're like, I I'm not expecting you to look like you're 23 years old, you
Yeah.
know, because you're 37. So like of course you
Yeah.
have a body of a 37-year-old, right? And it's like, oh right, cool. We're all getting older together. Like
Yes.
everyone is getting older.
Yeah.
Everybody's bodies are changing. Like, you know, if you haven't had a baby, your body's still gonna change.
Totally.
If you are in a body that doesn't give birth to babies, like a man's body, for example, also gonna change.
Yeah.
You know, they're dealing with all the same weird stuff that we are too. So it's kind of like it gets, I think sex to me gets kind of lighter and funnier as
Yes.
you get older,
Totally. Less
because
serious,
you're,
more comfortable. You're
yes,
also more
exactly,
comfortable in your own body, in your own skin.
right, yeah,
And
like it's
having
much
kids,
less like pornographic
yeah.
in terms of like, look at all these things that we're doing because we've just like learned about them, and so now we're gonna play them out and we're gonna kind of explore and we're gonna put on like this like show for each other. Meanwhile, now, like when you're older, you're like, here's this thing I really like to do that might not look like anything you've ever seen, but it kind of works for me. So like, let's just go with it. And the other person's
Yeah.
like, okay, cool, whatever's easiest. You know,
Totally. I
it's
know.
so funny.
Sex
Yeah.
totally gets better when you're older, I
Right.
think. I mean,
Yeah.
that's been my experience anyway.
I hope so. I mean, I'm only getting older, so I hope
Yes.
it keeps getting
Let's hope it
better.
continues in that direction.
You need to do a sexuality after 60 because I want to
Yeah.
know what happens
Yeah.
then.
I'm planning on it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I'm
That's great.
looking for some people to interview. So if you know anybody, let me
Call
know.
my mom.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, if she'd be into it, let me know.
She might be.
um, yeah. Speaking of your partner, that was something I was thinking about too, is that comes into play with sex after having a baby or sex as parents, is
Mhm.
that, the partner is also dealing with a lot of stuff like no sleep, having this new baby around and all the things you have to learn, um, the added responsibility a lot of times of being the sole, financial provider, at least
Mhm.
maybe during a certain amount of time, or just the responsibility of having a baby. And that can, like, a lot of times guys don't want to have sex either. And sometimes it
Yeah.
can be the opposite. Maybe she feels horny and he's not into it. And then it's like, oh, well, what's wrong with me? And like that can happen too.
Yep.
Or maybe neither of you wants to have sex for a year. Like that's also
Right.
normal. So I just want to
Yeah.
normalize, like,
Oh, yeah.
guys don't always want to have sex all the time necessarily.
No. And I
So
mean, there's so many different reasons that I've definitely heard this a lot as well. And like it can just start to, like, whatever our routine is, like it does become a routine. So if a routine after having a baby involves like all of the attention constantly being on the baby, like partners also, like husbands, whoever, wives, whoever didn't physically give birth, like they can also be kind of looking around going like, where is my attention? And the less attention that I get, the less I even maybe need, or the more focused I am on the baby, the less sexy I feel. And
yeah,
also, like, anybody could look around and go, whoa, what just happened to our carefree fun life? And like that can be a libido killer for anybody, right? Like
Totally.
walking into a house and you're like, why does it faintly smell like poo? And
Yeah.
like, what's with all the dishes in the sink, and your entire cool living room is now turned into a playground
Yeah.
area, and you're like, what the hell? It doesn't create a very sexy atmosphere. So for sure there are men who are also like, I'm just tired and I'm just like overwhelmed with coming home to this insanity, and it's like that is not hot for most people. Like we talked about,
Yes.
how you can see parents and be like, that's super hot. Not when it's in your house. Like usually when it's in your own house, you're like, this is not very hot. This is actually like such a mood killer, because all I want to do is like get this shit cleaned up and then like get into bed and turn on the TV. Like,
Yeah.
and that could happen for both people. So especially when it's a combination of the two, I mean, geez, like
Yeah.
you could just be like that forever until someone goes, wait a minute, should we be having sex?
Yeah.
Like, what are we supposed to do now? How do we even get back into it? And I think too, like the longer it goes on, and this for sure happened to me, like it almost got to the point where I was like, I'm like uncomfortable being sexual now with my husband because we haven't done it in so long. It's like, I'd rather have sex with a stranger who like, doesn't know anything about me at this point, because like I don't know how to act anymore. Like I don't know how to be like, "Ugh, who am I?" Like, it's just like it just
Totally.
got to be such a, like psychological like mind fuck of like, I don't know like who I am, and so many layers.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I think the big take, like something that I'm kind of taking away from this conversation is that no matter what your experience is, it's normal.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
like you're not the only one. We never
Mhm.
are with sexuality or anything else.
Right.
And but I don't know, like it's so important to have compassion on ourselves and not shame ourselves or judge ourselves over what our sex life is or isn't doing, what our sexuality, where it is or isn't. And also to communicate with your partner, which
Easier
can be
said than
hard,
done, I
but
think.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sometimes it seems for some people anyway that like this is something that shouldn't require work, or that shouldn't be at the top of our list of priorities, especially after we have a baby, because like babies are very important. Babies are, everything. And so it's like once we start to add the babies and then all the responsibilities that come with them, like the money stuff and the daycare stuff and the, what, like making sure you're always like doing the best thing for this baby, like so much focus goes there that it's like sex, like wait, that's something that people without babies worry about. Like that's something that you focus on when you don't have other things to think about,
Yeah.
and people kind of knock it down the list, and like kind of the further it falls, like the less likely you are to get there. So, even to say like, oh, communicate with your partner, about your sex life, people are like, oh, I got to communicate with them about a whole lot of other stuff first, and it does start to, for some people, becomes like way less and less of a priority. Um, and then of course, if someone's bringing it up all the time, the other person's like, come on, like focus on what matters here. Like
Yeah.
that's not necessarily what we need to be thinking about. But at the end of the day, like you do, if you want to have a long lasting, relationship with your sexuality and the person that you're with, obviously. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't just kind of like put it in a drawer and leave it there for 10 years and hope that it's still there. Like that happens with clothes I haven't worn. And then I'm like, oh, was there a mouse that like chewed a hole through this entire dress that I thought I was gonna wear? Like,
Yeah.
you gotta make sure that you like take it out and air it out every once in a while. Otherwise, like
Yeah.
I don't know what it's gonna look like.
Yeah. Which is one reason why masturbation again is good,
Mm,
because when you don't have a lot of time, you can still, take 5 or 10 or 20 minutes to masturbate.
right.
Yeah.
And it
And
also,
air it
I
out.
think, yeah, and it reminds you, oh yeah, this feels good. Because most people, when they do, like, if they are struggling, let's say with having sex, like most people are reminded in those 10-15 minutes afterwards, like, oh, we should do this more often. Like, this was
Totally.
fun.
I know.
Right. And so most of that is because, yeah, you're feeling great. It was nice. It was fun. It was a good time. And so for sure, if you're masturbating, like that's at least one way for your body to kind of like keep, oh yeah, right, this feels good, so like it's kind of a muscle in a way. Like the more you do it, the more you're going to want to do it. The less you do it, the less you want to do it,
Yeah.
and so, and it becomes easier to kind of get into it, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it,
And
it's
yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah. It is hard. Yeah. Masturbating together is also a good like halfway point. If people ever think about that, it's like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
I don't really want to have sex right now per se, but I'd be happy to make out with you and tickle your balls while you masturbate or like,
Yeah.
whatever. And then maybe you can
Yeah.
rub my back after, rub my feet, or like you can find a way to be close and intimate
Mhm.
without having to have sex if that's a big deal for whatever
Yeah.
reason. Like if you're sore or you're just really tired or whatever.
Yeah.
There's ways that both people can get their needs met, I guess.
Yeah. I think too, just like, for sure, it's a different thing if someone's like, I really don't want to physically, like for many reasons, that's totally fine. But I think sometimes, like, we almost have to trick ourselves, kind of like with the lying naked together thing. But also, then you mentioned massage. And I always just think about like anytime a couple is like giving each other a massage, like it kind of almost always leads to some sort of sex, because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, should I take your pants off for this? And then it's
Yeah.
like, it starts off innocently enough, which is like fun and playful. And I think like it's all about sort of taking the pressure off of things. Cause as soon as we put pressure and expectations, it's like very heavy, very loaded. If this goes wrong, there's going to be problems. Right. But if it wasn't meant to be sex in the first place, then nothing can really go wrong because we were just massaging, and then if it does turn into a sexual experience, like, yay, fun, great, unexpected, that adds a little bit of spontaneity to things,
Yeah.
I guess, um but also just like, okay, no one gets their feelings hurt if this is just a massage, because
As
that's what
long
we
as
said
you
we were
have the
going to do.
expectation that it's just a
Exactly.
massage.
Yeah. Right. But that's what I mean. Like, just
Yeah.
suggest, like, like, let's give each other massages, but like just massages. And
Yeah.
everyone's like, okay, just massages, and it
Yeah.
could totally just be massages. Like, you could be like, thank you, good night. Like, I've fully fallen asleep after
Totally.
a massage. Like, bye, whatever. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Of
you know?
course. And that's totally
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just the mounting pressures that people have after having a baby, like the way that mothers feel with just like the weight of the world. Like, the last thing that you want to add to that pile is sex, because sex is supposed to be like the fun thing that we have in life. There's also just like a lot wrapped up in all of that, because like for most people, sex got you into this trouble in the first place, so you're
Yeah.
like, oh, PTSD from that time we had sex and then had a baby, and now we have this baby that never sleeps, so
Yeah.
there's that too.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Is there anything else that you kind of wish that we had talked about or that you want to mention about sex after motherhood?
I mean, I think for me the big takeaway is just like being as open-minded as possible about what things could look like, and being really patient. We're in this world where we want everything to get sorted out immediately, you know and as you know, when you have a baby, like that's not how babies work. They don't operate in this world, this like 21st century world that we're living in. They don't do things when you want them to do things. They don't sleep when you want them to sleep. They don't hit the milestones when they're supposed to. And like, neither will you. So if you're putting all of these expectations on, like, okay, by 6 weeks, I'll be able to start exercising and, fucking my husband again. Like, okay, hold on a second. Like, you might not do either of those things.
Yeah.
And it might be 6 months before you want to do that kind of thing. And you will probably never fit into those pre-pregnancy genes, because your body is actually on a skeletal level different than it was before you
Right.
gave birth. So
Yeah.
like, that's a thing, and to just kind of like remind people that, as soon as you start to place like markers of where you think you're supposed to be, what are you going to do? You're going to probably disappoint yourself. You're going to get frustrated. That's not sexy. So if we're talking about sex, I think it should really just be like, focus on where you're at, like, and be honest about how you're feeling, because I think there is like a little bit of shame involved in like the feeling horny or the not feeling horny, and neither of those things are shameful, right?
Yeah.
Like it does go back to just like, your relationship with yourself, but also like how comfortable you are with what's going on, to just kind of like, you are fully in this physical experience during pregnancy and childbirth, and then afterwards there's no getting away from your own body at that point, so just being really focused on like, what do I want, how do I feel, hey cool, I'm horny, like, okay cool, you're horny, you got to go tell your partner if you want them involved, like they're not just going to read your mind, because maybe the last 5 times you haven't been, so they're giving you some space. And it doesn't mean that it's a rejection, and that doesn't mean that you rejected them, but like, I I don't even know if this is a real product, but I saw some kind of ad for it, and it was basically just like each couple has like a little button that they push on something, and then like when both people push it, it like lights up. And I don't know if it was like something to do with, I don't know, a
I
song
love
or
it.
entertainment, and it might be a sex related toy, I don't know, but I'm like, this is genius, because sometimes it's just nice to be able to be like, boop, like I had a thought about sex, or even to just text, the person that you're with, to be like, hey, like I'm feeling pretty horny right now, like I wish
Yeah.
this baby would go to sleep, or like whatever way is easiest for you to communicate. Some people don't feel comfortable just being like, I want to have sex right now, some people
Yeah.
are like, he'll read my body language and my mind. It's like,
No, no, he won't.
no, no,
We are
he
not
definitely
psychic.
won't.
Yeah.
Right?
You give people way too much credit when you think that.
Exactly. So I think like as long as you're realistic about, what life is going to be like afterwards, and then actually just like kind of sink into that and go like, okay, things are different. I knew I'm not going to get my 3-hour sex sessions with a newborn. That's just not going to happen. And you just have to like be totally honest with how you're feeling, what you want, which again, easier said than done.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes it's also easier for people to have like a code word for sex, because that sometimes can keep it light and funny. Like, I don't know if it has to be something that you wouldn't normally say. So it could be like tiger ice cream could be your code word for sex. And you're
Right.
like, hey, do you feel like eating some tiger ice cream? Or like, oh, I feel like a tiger ice cream cone or something. And it's just kind of,
Yeah.
I know a few people do that, and it just kind of keeps it
Just
light,
playful. Like I think
playful.
it
Yeah.
really just is about like taking off that pressure of like, hi, do you want to go fuck now? And
Yeah.
then the other person's like, but if it's said in a more playful way, or if it's introduced in a way that like again isn't so much pressure, because I think that that's what a lot of moms are feeling. It's just like, wow, another thing to check off my list. Now I've got to make sure this other person is happy and fulfilled. And like I spent the whole day making sure this tiny little, you know, asshole roommate that moved in is happy and fulfilled. Like now when they go to bed, I have to make sure the other person is too. Like,
Yeah.
man, that's a lot of work, you know?
Yeah.
But if it's presented in a way of like, ooh, we could have some fun together, you're like, oh, I like fun. Fun sounds
Yeah.
fun, you know?
Yeah. And for moms to ask themselves, what do I want? Like, what would I actually really enjoy? If I don't want sex, what might I enjoy? Oh, I might enjoy mutual masturbation, or I might enjoy a massage. And what might I enjoy doing with my husband or my partner? Oh, I could actually really get into making out with him while he masturbates, or I could really get into this. And so there's, you know, yeah, there's always options.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I mean, if there's this huge divide between someone with a big sex drive and someone who, is experiencing a lower sex drive, I feel like the person with the bigger sex drive has to be the one to kind of um like create the mood and not just show up expecting there to be some sort of sexual
Totally.
scene or experience for them, so it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you, the one who wants sex all the time, like why don't you make it so that there's something sexual that can happen here, like
Yes.
and unfortunately, like in, you know, hetero relationships, women most of the time are the planners, we're the romantic types, we're the ones who are doing all of like that behind the scenes work to like make something really like, you know, to have clean sheets on the bed, you know, to
Yeah.
like have stuff organized so that we're not thinking about a million things, you know. And it's like, imagine if someone else did all that work for us and we could just show up and like just totally get, you know,
And
sexed
be
up. Like,
pampered. Yeah.
yeah, you know, like I would show up if someone was like, "Oh, by the way, everything's done. Like all the stuff in the house is done, and like I also paid the bills, and like now I just want to like take you to the bedroom and like eat you out." I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Okay, like I guess I can't say no to that." Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
but
Exactly.
that's not usually how people are presenting it. They're like, "I want to have sex and you never want to have sex." And you're like, "Oh, we
Yeah.
have to have this conversation? Like, why?" Because it's pressure. It's not
Yeah.
fun, you
Yeah.
know? So hopefully, if any like higher sex drive partners slash men, which is hopefully they listen to this and
Yeah.
clue in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
they're
Is there
like,
any other
just take a
advice you
sound bite.
yeah. Yeah. Is there
Take
any
that
other
1 minute.
yeah. Any other advice you'd give men or partners?
Oh, I wish that there was some way for me to just access like all the partners and men, you know, to and like host some sort of webinar for them. But of course, they would never sign up willingly for something like that for themselves. Um, I mean, I have a lot of advice for them, and I think, you know, most of the time it's just showing up, you know, especially as it relates to just like having a child. You know, when I teach prenatal classes, I tell partners who are, I would say 98% of the time in my classes, it's a man. I say, you know, there is nothing sexier than taking initiative. Like that is the hottest thing that any person can do.
It's
Right.
true.
And most people, like when we talk about like love languages, you know, for people who are familiar with that, like for a lot of people, love language is kind of all wrapped up in like acts of service, like people doing something for you, you know, and it could be like cooking a meal, it could be buying a present, it could be taking care of that errand, it could be whatever it is. But I think that, you know, when we start to have this divide of like, you know, typically male partners helping with the parenting, you know, it puts this weird division in terms of like who's responsible for the things in the home and who's the helper in the home. And like, that's not hot to me, you know. What's really hot is someone who shows up and goes, "It's already done." Did
Yeah.
it. And you're like, "Oh my god, did it. Like, let's go and I'll do you,"
Yes.
you know, because
Yes.
like you did the thing. Like I didn't have to do anything, no management required. Like, woo, that frees up time and energy for me and my brain to go other places, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that's a huge thing. It's just like when people show initiative, and men love that too, like when women do that. And you know, it doesn't matter what kind of couple that you're in, but like when people go, "Hey, I did that thing for you," you're like, "Oh my god, yes."
Yeah.
It's never a bad thing, you know. So it can only improve whatever else is happening in the house.
100%.
Yeah,
Super sexy.
I know. So hot, so hot.
Yes.
Like it's already done. That's like foreplay for me. I'm like, "Oh my god."
It
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
It's true though.
Yeah.
Um, your partner taking responsibility and I don't know how to explain it. Like maybe it's just taking responsibility for things is really hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got this. You're like,
Yeah.
well,
Yes.
in that case, I
Exactly.
have some time and you're
Right.
turning me on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to do something. Like, now you're speaking my language. You know?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Because I mean, with a baby does come a long list of daily repeated, you know, to-dos that are never ending. And so yeah, like that's an endless to-do list that never, you know, ongoing is not hot. Like that does not get most people going. Like, "Oh my god, I'm never going to complete my to-do list." No sense of accomplishment ever. Hard to really pinpoint what it is that I do around here and what I've accomplished. For a lot of people who thrive on checking stuff off of a list and making sure all the, you know, T's are crossed and whatever, you know? Like that is like, okay, like, what is this? Some endless hamster wheel of nonsense? Like, what? And you don't get a sense of like, wow, look at me. Like, I'm killing it. I've got this, and that's a part of where a lot of people get their self-esteem from. And self-esteem is normally connected to, how you feel about every part of yourself, how you look to the world around you. And if you go out and you're like, I am a useless mom, and everyone looks at me like I am trash because I'm in my Old Navy t-shirt and my yoga pants. When you get home, you're not like, hey, sexy mama's back.
Yeah.
It's just like, you get home and you're like covered in poop and just like, just want to go to bed and have a nap,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I have been there.
I think parenting sounds so depressing, but it's not that bad.
No, we know that there's also amazing things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So to end with, I wanted to ask you, what is one thing you wish you knew as a teenager about sex or sexuality?
I love this question. Because I personally feel like a lot of my own ideas about sexuality come from those formative teenage years, right? Where a lot of our ideas about sex are kind of bubbling to the surface. And I think what I wish I knew back then was that my sexuality and my desire to explore it doesn't have anything to do with the people that I'm with or their, I guess, ideas about who I am as a sexual person. Because I took a lot of my, I guess, worth or value as a sexual being from other people's ideas of me. And I think that definitely changes when you get older, when you realize like, I can be exactly who I am and see myself the way I want to be seen, regardless of how someone else wants to view me. Like I don't get sexier because other people want me, and that's, I think, hard obviously as a teenager, because everything is about how the world around you is looking at you and how they see you. It's very hard to be completely, centered in your sense of self. But I would definitely go back and be like, Megan, like, you can be, super sexual and open-minded about sex and all of those things, but you don't need to go and like take that out on everybody around you to prove that, those are not connected.
Yes, it is amazing. I could not have put it better. I love that.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful. I don't know how you communicate that to kids as they grow up, but I'm definitely going to try.
Yeah.
Definitely going to try to teach my kids that, because it's so true. Your sexuality is yours.
Yeah.
Yours.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have anything to do with anybody else.
No.
You can share it, but it's yours first and foremost.
Yeah. Exactly. So go masturbate.
So go masturbate. This is our call to action to all parents and non-parents.
I'm always joking. Anytime I say something that's like a one-liner, I'm like, I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Now I'm like, I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Go masturbate.
Yes.
Like, that's
go
the
masturbate
best.
t-shirts. I love it.
Yeah.
I really want one too.
Yeah. I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I loved this podcast. I've loved talking to you.
Me.
I feel like we could be pretty good friends if we lived in the same city.
I know. I feel
Montreal.
like that about so many people. I'm like, why? But even if you lived in this city, I probably wouldn't be able to see you right now anyway.
All right, now, not with COVID.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it too.